Welcome to the Programmatic Digest podcast, a weekly roundup of top programmatic news with fellow programmatic ninjas. I'm your host, Helene Parker, your very own programmatic Sensei. Thank you for joining us today. Before we get into today's conversation, subscribe, like, and share. Leave us a comment if you need any more details. Visit our website, programmaticdigest.com, programmaticdigest.com, where you'll be prompted for our new weekly or monthly newsletter. It only alerts you when there's a new episode live. So thank you so much for all your support and love, and remember to be curious. Enjoy the conversation. Welcome to the Sensei's Corner, Brian. How are you doing today?
Doing great, thanks. It's nice to finally chat. I know we've tried to line this up a couple times, and here we are.
It's absolutely okay. Things happen, especially in this post-pandemic, pre-pandemic, whichever stage we're at right now. It's definitely okay. It happens to the best of us. But I'm super excited about today's conversation. For those who don't know you yet, how about you give us a quick intro about yourself and specifically about WorkReduce and the magic that is happening internally?
Sure, thanks. So I'm the CEO and founder of WorkReduce. And WorkReduce is a company that helps bring talent and advertisers together and agencies. And so we've been around for about 7 years. Before I was doing this, I helped build a demand side platform. I used to be a software engineer. And, I really saw that the problems we were solving weren't being solved by AI. They were being solved by people. And I wanted to lean into that. And as I've gotten kind of deeper into it, I've really kind of grown in my conviction that advertising really faces a big talent problem or opportunity, depending on how you look at it. And we're here to help, solve that problem for our clients and to help our employees, do better in their careers.
I love that, because I think today's conversation is going to be geared towards how to reframe your team. I think in our industry, we're so used to thinking full-time or part-time employee. And I don't know I think it's shifting. It started to shift, especially in the last year. It helped us understand, one, we can work from anywhere and still be much more productive than being within an office. I know I refuel around people, so it's really hard to be at home. But thankfully, I have a boss babe, 15-month-old, and I have a boss dog.
That's great.
Thank you. And I have a boss dog and a boss husband. So at least I have some type of interaction, but so understand why people are excited to go back into office and why companies will think about having their people in an office, within the same walls, to build some level of culture. So
there's a lot. You just touched on a whole lot of stuff right there. There's a lot going on. I mean, if you think about I recharge and get energy from people too. And I'm one of those kind of introvert extroverts where I need it, and then I need to be able to recharge.
Oh yeah, and let me stay at home for at least a couple days to reboot.
It's some people ask me how can you do remote? Right? We've been remote for 7 years. It's crazy when I think about it. Now people are like, wow, how are you so kind of right so early about remote? And I was really just being cheap when I wanted to start the company, right? It was I knew it was an opportunity. And the thing that really, struck me as I started WorkReduce and we were beginning to work with remote employees 7 years ago was the vast amounts of talent that were out there and were untapped, right? And that's the kind of the kernel of why we're remote and why I think a lot of companies will stay at least partially remote or hybrid going forward, is because you can't afford to let somebody else go out there and get the talent where you're they got to be in New York. Well, what if there's somebody amazing in Louisville? And Louisville is one of those cities where we find people in Louisville. I never would have guessed it would be Louisville, right? You might have said Raleigh, obviously, whatever, or you name a city, but we're finding talent in unusual places. So we've got to balance, right, that desire to be kind of with people and next to our colleagues and just being able to be hey, let me ask you about this thing with that talent access. And then there's a million reasons why people want to be remote, right? I remember finding, this amazing, programmatic trader a
Mm-hmm.
while back. And, he was living in Merced, California,
Mm-hmm.
because his wife got a tenure track position at UC Merced, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, if you're married to an academic and they get something tenure track, like that's it. Like you got to go, right? So
Yeah.
there are people for millions of reasons who are not in these urban areas, and that part's not going to change, right? So it's a question of like, then how do you balance it, right? And so for our internal team, like we have kind of get-togethers periodically, and we're actually starting to do it again now that, well, knock on wood, in terms of where we're kind of like
Yeah.
at with
Oh,
the
God.
pandemic. But we did our first kind of is it an offsite if we don't have a site? I don't know what the word for it is, right?
Okay, that's funny. What's the proper term here?
Right. What's it's our on-site. Like
Yeah.
so we got together recently here in Washington D.C. for the first time, and it was just great to see people, and like, look,
Yeah.
like it's a thing, and
Yeah.
you can't like you can't deny that, like when we're talking about the great parts about work, right? So
Mhm.
it's always about that balance.
So talk to us because I love what you just said about like the offsite, inside, onsite. But talk to us about how WorkReduce maintained that amazing culture. And the reason why I
Sure.
know it's an amazing culture is because I've worked with WorkReduce. I've done I've had some buyers
Yep.
a project as a buyer, as project management, as trafficking, like literally WorkReduce have come and supported my lifestyle for my
Yes.
family in the best way. And there's a couple of companies like that, but I really wanted you to tell our amazing listeners how you maintain that culture because you can feel it literally in Slack or in like talking to your supervisor or the lead on the account. Like, how do you make sure to maintain that culture?
Welcome to the Programmatic Meetup. Yay! I'm so excited about this community that we're building. It's going to be a safe space for media buyers, ad ops, programmatic ninjas, data analysts like you and I, just to come up and talk about our day-to-day challenges in our direct roles, some of our wins, and some of our opportunities to grow, to educate ourselves. Some of the topic of discussion includes anything from optimization, best practice, QA, templating, workflow, operational workflow. I'll have guest appearance. I'm bringing my network to you, and the best part of it is that you'll have one-on-one questions with them. I'm so excited about this, yo. I'm so hyped. So what to expect in your membership, right? You can expect 1 hour call every first and third Wednesday of the month. Access to all the recordings for the paid members within our community. Discounted one-on-one consulting with me and some of the guests that will be gracing us with their presence and their appearance. Customizable trainings, but most importantly, your best friends, y'all. I'm very excited about this opportunity. This is a community for you and I. This is a community for us to just join forces and really share, really just being able to be together in a community. There's so much growth when you're in a community, when you're able to relate to people, or somebody understands where you're coming from different perspective, right? So join today. Programmatic Meetup community is open to you. Bring your friends, tell your friends to bring his friends, to bring her friends and his friends to meet up with us. We respect you, we love you, we appreciate you. We're ready to support you. So make sure you join the Programmatic Meetup. Thank you. I'm so excited about this. Yeah, I don't know if you can tell, but I'm very excited about it. So thank you so much and see you soon.
Sure. I mean, it starts with hiring, right? You've got to find people. You got to find the right people and put them in the right roles,
Mm-hmm.
right? And those two things, like it's not that easy, is what I found. And so, early on, I very early, as in the first days of doing proof of concept work for WorkReduce, I found people like Ashley Stewart,
Mm-hmm.
who are with us now, like 7 years later, right? And so there's a little bit of luck, right, in finding people like Ashley who had been working remotely, and just kind of getting that vibe, like, hey, this is a vibe that I know is going to be productive, right? Is a really important starting point. Finding people who, you want to work with, and then, making sure that you share the values, as you're expanding your team or your company, right? And the values that we focus on are like, it's like getting stuff done, right? That's like the big one. It's like, above all else, we got to get stuff done. Yeah. And like, if you can't focus on that, if that can't be like your top priority, then, there's something else for you, right? And there's a million jobs out there for a million people, but we want the get shit done people. We want people who are, also sitting there and saying, hey, I'm not just going to get it done. I'm going to like make stuff better while I'm doing it. We're going to like leave, like, when you go camping, they're like, leave it, better than when you found it. Like, it's kind of like that. So you start with those values, right? And make sure that you've got shared values, but then it's kind of like, well, how do you then perpetuate that as you scale up? And that's when you start getting into, having, team happy hours, even virtually. We had one recently where, we brought in, I don't know if you were on this one, we brought a llama sanctuary in.
No, I missed that.
Did you miss the llamas?
Yeah.
It was great. And
I heard about it. I was like, don't.
So they had llamas and like horses and goats, and we're all sitting here having cocktails on Zoom and like, watching llamas, and people are bringing their kids. It's like, it doesn't take a ton. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like I feel like I'm barely scratching the surface in terms of what we can do with our culture. But, clearly I think what you're telling me is that it's at least working a little bit,
Yeah.
So we're, it doesn't take a ton, I think, if you've got those kind of core values, the right people, and honestly, it's a vibe, right? Like, it really is kind of like, what do you want it to be like going to work, and getting back to the remote thing and like, get feeding from people. It's like, when I was young, like early in my career, it's like your work friends are your friends too. Yeah. Right. And especially like you're coming out of college, like going somewhere new, that old social circle is gone. And then you kind of replace it with a work social circle. But like, work's not the only place to find friends. You know what I mean? And at a certain point, like I realized in my career, like I actually want my like friends and my work friends to be like not the same thing. You know what I mean? And it's kind of like healthier and better. And I still have tons of like amazing professional friends and colleagues and stuff like that. But you get to a maturity point where you're like, all right, I need a separate life. And so we try to encourage that a little bit too. It's like, hey, you're not married to your job. You're married to your spouse, right? Or like, whatever it is.
Yeah, man. I think you're bringing up, I want to highlight what you just said. Like, you're not married to your job and you need to get back out there and socialize, but not only like safely, of course. But I think the biggest point that we need to take home, like if you start the podcast right now, is flexibility and time freedom.
Well, and it's also like not in getting it's really deep into the advertising part of it. It's like 60 to 80 hour weeks are unsustainable. No. Have like a FaceTime culture where you just got to like be there. Yep. It's not that sustainable, right? Exactly. So, I think as an industry, we got to kind of like look that really square in the face. And the ad industry is facing a lot of challenges right now. People are leaving, right? People are leaving the industry at a time when the amount of work that needs to be done is rising. So you got people leaving, work going up, and this gap is kind of growing in the middle. And you're not going to solve it by grinding it out indefinitely, right? Yeah. Grinding is great. I really believe in hard work, and there are times and places when a grind is the best thing for you and the best thing for your business. And like, it's great. I've spent plenty of time working my ass off in my life, but like, it's not, you can't do it forever. No, I've burnt out before. Everybody's been burnt out, right? And like, it's no way to run an industry, right? So how do you address that? And that's where we say, hey, look, let's kind of prescribe, or circumscribe a 40-hour box around this stuff. If it's not getting done in 40 hours, like, let's just take a break here, right? Yeah. Like, we try to say that for our team members, even as they're going into these very demanding environments of holding companies, of managing, 8-figure budgets for a quarter. And it's like, you can still get it done. It's about prioritization, but it also comes back to how are you managing your client relationships? It's very, very complicated to actually kind of like wrestle this stuff down to be a tractable problem. But it can be done,
Yeah, it absolutely can be done. Like, and you're right. Like I tell on the podcast very often that we almost value long hours over mental health, over physical health. And if you, like, I was joking on the previous podcast, actually, I think it was episode 50 with Suzanne Wallace. And I was joking with her that I used to work for agencies way back when, even before I became a freelancer, where we will all get to the office by like 5 a.m. or 6 in the morning to start on our day. That's how busy it got. And sometime when one of us will show up at 6 a.m. and the other one will say, oh, I've been here since 5:30 or 5 a.m., we would feel guilty about not showing up at 5 in the morning.
Right.
It's like, no, this is not healthy. And I think
6 a.m. is a great time to get work done, though. I mean,
I have to admit that it is. Now that I'm a mom and I'm working from home, I get my 6 or even like sometimes 4 to 7 is like a good time for me to be uninterrupted. But best believe that my 8 to 11 will be extremely flexible. Like it's not going to be, and that's what we were talking about, the flexibility in time. Like if you're getting your shit done, I don't care how you get it done, just get it done. And of course, sometimes you're like when you're in account executives or you're in account management, sometimes you have to be available within the same time frame as a client. Sometimes, absolutely. I don't know. So that I can understand why sometimes those requirements are a little bit more restricted and limited for certain job and roles. But ultimately, it's knowing when to take a break. And we talk about work-life balance in our industry, but I don't think we understand the beauty of work-life balance. And to me, it's like an exchange, like it's transactional. Like as an agency, we say, hey, I'll let you go to your kid's soccer game if you work extremely late all these days. I'm like, no, I only took 1 hour away and you're asking 7 hours back. Like that's not work-life balance. How do you build that boundary? And I also think it's a good segue into the next questions in terms of like, there are agencies, there are brands out there, there are companies that are building their programmatic in-house, right?
Yeah.
And what do you need? What should you tell those agencies, brands, companies about when is a good time to reach out to WorkReduce or when to expand their workforce, their programmatic ninjas, beside thinking to go for a full-time employee?
Sure.
Like, what would be a good thing that they need to remember?
Well, I think brands in particular are really well suited to getting outside help of various forms. Large enterprises in general are kind of allergic to headcount, and much more so than agencies have been using outside firms for everything from, the front desk people to the janitors to the accountants, for decades, right? So large enterprises, a lot of them, like a place like a Google, 50% of the employees roughly are employed through a third party. So there's just a bunch of different models that you can use to adopt those people, right? And in many cases, you've got folks who they're just like a team member, right? They've got an email address. They've got a desk if you're, not a remote workforce like us, in every way. And usually you might have a different colored badge, like at Google, or I used to work at Nokia back when it made cell phones,
Wow, that's a throwback. Nokia?
Oh yeah.
That is a throwback.
Oh yeah. I used to go to Finland for that shit all the time. And so you had people who were externals and you had people who were internals. You just had a different badge, right? And so Nokia, like Google, it was probably about 50-50 internal and external employees. So you can do it that way where it's just like a team member. And so I think any enterprise is used to doing that. And maybe on the advertising side, they don't know, or, the in-housing isn't mature enough that people are aware how common that is, or that they have a lot of options, not just me, in terms of, vendors for that. But then the other one is a more of a task-driven approach, which we really like with enterprises. So, for example, with ad operations, we have a global 24/7 team who is doing ad ops, right? And so, we have clients who, like HP or HP Enterprise, or Tommy Hilfiger have come to us and said, "Hey, look, we need you guys to be doing task-driven work. We want a service desk for this." And it's very like ticket driven. Mm-hmm. And it's a kind of a different thing, right? In a lot of ways. And when we approach that work, as I think, like mm-hmm. It's always about being, like hyper quality focused, mm-hmm. checklist driven, because you're buying the results, not the people in that case. And so we've got to deliver the results above all else. And so you really have this kind of like, I think mentally, like we look at models from, commercial airlines, mm-hmm. right? The safety record of, the U.S. Commercial air industry is like insane. And it's because they have two people, they're using checklists. So we adopt that. We use automation, in that work. And the automation is mainly, it is in part to make like, complex tracking tasks easier, but like half of it is making sure that like when we get a request in, it's internally consistent. It's got all the data, right? And then the output matches the input, right? And so automating that stuff to ensure the quality is, our secret sauce on doing the task-driven work. So I think if you're going in-house, you can lease people, right? Which is great. You can do this task-driven work, which I think is a more mature mindset, and one where you're thinking about division of labor, right? Between folks. Like if you've got a fixed number of heads that you can bring in your in-house advertising operations, where do you want to invest, right? Do you want to invest? Is ad operations your best investment? Mm-hmm. Or would you rather have me invest in making ad operations really good, right? Like that's the kind of, and I can invest in there and amortize that investment across dozens and dozens of clients. Yeah. And you're sitting there like, I don't know, where you want to invest is where you've got the highest leverage, right? As an enterprise. And that is in matching your strategy to the execution, developing the strategy, matching your advertising strategy to your business goals. Those are the things that I think they complain about, rightfully or wrongly, about their agencies not being fully aligned with, right?
Yeah.
And so,
there's
division of labor,
there's a lot of moving pieces. And I think, again, I'm trying to highlight all the amazing gems you just dropped. Like, are you looking for somebody that's task oriented, or are you looking for something else? Are you building up? Are you expanding your department? I'm in a few entrepreneurship groups, and the best thing we tell each other, or I guess we teach each other, is like, what is something that your business need? So I'm going to reframe this as a department. What is something that your department needs to succeed? What are things that are urgent and important? Write it down. It's so simple. Write it down. Yep. See where you're lacking. If that is not your directly, whatever, even if you know how to do it, can somebody else do it more efficiently so that you can go on and living your best life? No, I'm kidding. So you can go on and actually be the leader that you're supposed to be, or that you're in position to be, or expand. You can be more strategic and step away from the day-to-day.
100% with you.
Exactly. Build your team that way. Like, you can't just guess like, oh, I think I need a media buyer. No. If you do need a media buyer, what exactly that means? Like, I've discovered that media buying roles varies, and it's the same title. Agencies define those roles differently, right? Absolutely. I have my own definition based on my experience, and I think that's what a media buyer should be. But sometimes you'll read a job description, for instance, and it's totally different than day-to-day. So I think it's a good way to end like the segment. And like what you said, sometimes you just need the help, and it's not, the investment will come out because of the result. period. So are you result driven? Are you task driven? What are you trying to do? And you have to make some investment in order to get your time back, in order to get some money back, in order to get some results back. You have to invest. And sometimes it's just hiring a WorkReduce contractor, or sometimes it's just looking at implementing tools, automation tools internally. We had a guest on the podcast, Noor Nasir. She talked about how they implemented a bunch of automation tool and that actually lifted the productivity of their team, because now instead of having like siloed communication and then urgency pop up here and there and fires, now she just, they're able to address it in advance. So how to become proactive versus reactive. But I definitely appreciate you for this conversation, because it's still something that we're going through. Like you mentioned, like enterprise companies wise, it's more common, but like as an agency, I think we pride ourselves again in having somebody that can do it and do it for a long time, for long hours. But sometimes you need the help, and it's as easy as hiring or investing in that person. So if they had to stop listening to the podcast right now, what is 2 things you can tell them about our conversation? Like, hey, remember these 2 and you're good to rock and roll. What are 2 like word of wisdoms?
Sure. I mean, I would say that the help is out there.
Mm-hmm.
It might not be in the form that you think you need. It might not be the form that you're kind of conceiving of it in, or have it preconceived of. But like, you can get help, and I think the other idea I'd throw in there is the idea of really trying to reduce the complexity upstream, right, and manage expectations from the client backwards, because we do face a lot of complexity, sometimes unnecessary complexity in executing media buys, and the complexity can spiral out of control and cause problems. So really being thoughtful with how you manage your clients, your commercial relationships with the clients, or even internal expectations if you're working in-house, and kind of solving those problems upstream are really key to building a sustainable advertising practice that doesn't burn people out, that helps advance people's careers, right? And keeps people around because they like what they're doing and they're not, burnt out after
that culture, and allowing them
getting up at 5:30 in the morning to buy ads on Facebook.
Racing to see who's going to get to the office first. But man, good times. I don't regret any of it. I wouldn't change any of it, because it built who I am now. But this is a great conversation. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Alan.
Before we part ways here, here's a one quick question. Tell us one fun fact about yourself.
What's a fun fact about me? I don't know. I play guitar.
That's fun.
I like plants. How's that?
That is a fun fact. That's a really fun fact. Yeah.
I just last fall I learned how to surf. That's like my new hobby is I learned how to surf. And
nice.
Fortunately, like living in DC, it's not a great place for getting out to the beach, but I like surfing.
That is really cool.
My new jam.
And apparently it's harder than it looks. I mean, people makes it look really easy, but I think it's harder than it looks.
It's a great upper body workout.
Good to know. That's good to know.
Really good.
What is the latest book you've read or listened to?
Well, I just started this. It's the New American Militarism. This is about how starting with the Reagan era, like there's a real militant mindset has kind of crept into American culture in a way that like post-Vietnam, I think we lost a little with the kind of peace movement in the 60s. So a friend of mine just gave me that. I was a history major in college, so I love geeking out on that stuff. And then I just read this. I think it was Pulitzer. This was a National Book Award finalist, Children's Bible. Really cool.
Children's Bible, sorry.
Yeah, it's like a post-apocalyptic story. It's got a little bit of a I don't know if you read Oryx and Crake by who's the woman who did The Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah, that one. Okay.
So it's got a little bit of that vibe, but that was really interesting. So I like to read.
So what was the first book for our listeners? For those are our listeners?
The first book is the New American Militarism.
New American Militarism.
Yeah, and it's by Andrew Bakovich.
Gotcha. And the second book was A Children's Bible.
The Children's Bible by Lydia Millett. Yeah. Both, you can see, if you're watching, you can see they're both pretty thin. So obviously the history book is a little bit denser.
Good to know. Good to know. Well, thank you so much for sharing, making the time for us today. This was very helpful. We'll have Brian back because we have so much more questions to ask you, of course. But if anybody needs to reach out to you, how do they do that?
Brian@WorkReduce.com.
It's simple and easy, and it'll be in our show notes for anyone that is interested. It's WorkReduce.com. So
Brian with an I.
Brian with an I. Good point. Good point. Yeah. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Alan. Catch you later.
Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your love and support. We hope you enjoyed the conversation. If you have any questions, feedback, or just simply want to say hi, email us at info@programmaticdigest.com. You can also visit the website, programmaticdigest.com, where we're always looking for guest hosts. We're also looking for sponsors. So hit us up if you're interested.